Yo, what's cracking, people? It's your boy J Palms. My name is Jeremy. I'm from Southwest London. I'm a producer. And yeah, this is my first YouTube video. I'm basically just gonna be running you guys through how you make quite like an emotional trap beat. And yeah, this is my first YouTube video, so forgive me if the editing's a bit whack. I'm still getting to grips with the software because I'm not much of a video editor. So yeah, I think in the future it's going to be a bit more precise, the edits, and it'll be less of a voiceover kind of talking you through it and more of a saying as it happens kind of thing. So at this point I'm just doing the MIDI roll for the main melody, and I picked some, I think a keyboard sound from Omnisphere, and I've laid it down in a minor scale. Those are the bass notes at the bottom, which just beef up the melody a whole lot more. And if your melody's sounding quite a bit like empty and not as wide as you want it to be, I would recommend putting down some bass notes following the root note of the segment of your MIDI roll, and that should really just beef up that melody and make it sound much more professional. And here I'm just applying an EQ, cutting some of the lows and cutting some of the highs. It's just your classic stuff. And I like to put my reverb on a bus, so all of my things that are using reverb are using the same reverb, so it stays consistent throughout the project. And yeah, it's just kind of a bit more of an easier way than kind of fiddling with the different knobs in the actual reverb plugin. So throughout the video, the soundtrack that you'll actually be hearing is the beat that I'm making. I thought it would be kind of a nice idea as opposed to you hearing it like over 1,000 times when I'm like making the thing, to just play it in the background as I'm talking you guys through my process. So the main kind of sad melody, I just thought a flute would just go on top of that really nicely. So I picked another flute from Omnisphere, a Mellotron flute. It's probably my favorite flute on the bank. And yeah, just laid down a little melody, keeping the key the same, and yeah, just applying a little boost to the mid highs, and cutting out a lot of the lows, because especially with something like a flute, you never really want any lows in there because it's going to mess with your bass, and the flute is quite a high pitched sound anyway. So, and I've applied some RC20 to both melodies because I just really love that plugin. It just gives it a really nice like vintage sound. And kind of levels it up from what it is beforehand. And you may have noticed there's a high note in the flute MIDI roll, and that's because the flute is already at like quite a high octave anyway, but I boosted that note because it was the same as the 4-bar before it, but I wanted to create some variation, so I boosted it up an octave and it was just a bit too piercing, so I just turned down pretty much half the velocity on that note, just so it just wasn't peaking as badly. And so what I'm doing here is another thing I like to do is I like to make my melodies, bounce them out, and just play around with the pitch a little bit, because it originally started in a specific key, and you know I was playing that in that key, and it sounded alright, but I think it's always good just to bounce it out and experiment with the pitch, because I think if you do adjust it like once or twice below what it is, it can really just hit differently. So yeah, that's what I did there. And right here I'm adding the vocal chops that you can hear in the beat. These vocal chops are from Arcade, another plugin that I really like to use. They've just got really great vocal sounds on there. They do some nice other sounds, but I mainly use it for its vocal chops because they just chop them so well and they sound so clean. And just a simple EQ on those, and a bit of reverb, and they sound fine. They sound really good, and a little bit of delay actually here, just to fill the space a little bit more. So here I'm starting on the drums. I always like to start with the clap, because that kind of gives you the basic rhythm of the beat. And once you've got the clap, you can kind of, I feel as if, what was it, clap or snare, whatever it may be, but the one on the 2 and the 4 bar. I feel like once you've got those in place, it starts you off from a much better position to think about the other drums. And that's exactly what I did just after the snares here. I took an open hat and I put it on ultra beat and changed the pitch so that I can manipulate it. If I put it underneath or on top, then it will actually change the pitch. And so I did the initial open hi-hat is just the original sample, and then the second one that plays right after it is actually a pitch down, which is not something I often do, but it just created a nice cool, almost sounded like a delay on the original hi-hat, but the delayed hi-hat was pitched down, so yeah, it just gave it a bit of texture. And the notes right here, I've just offset the hi-hats. These are the hi-hats. I like to add some rolls, but not a whole lot, because I think if you just put too many rolls in a beat, it just can get a bit annoying after a while. But if you really add to the drums, and I just offset them a tiny bit. I like to put the cursor, the time cursor over one of the hi-hats and just zoom in really hard and just offset them a tiny bit, because it makes them sound a bit more realistic and like someone's actually playing them, rather as opposed to me having played them in. And what I'm adding here is the bongos you can hear. Actually, I don't know if they're bongos. I think they're just a regular rim perk. But I often quite like to use rims because I just really like the sound. I think they sound really good as not the main snare, but they kind of offset the snare really nicely. So if you have it just a little bit before the snare to accentuate it, or a bit after, it just really adds to your drums. So here I'm doing the 808s, and what I like to do, especially in emotional beats, is I think it's just safe to say that in most occasions you just want your 808s to follow the root note of your main melody. So those bass notes that I did originally in the main melody, those are going to be my 808 notes. Those are the keys of my 808s, but you can change around the positioning a little bit, but I don't like to stray too far from it. And here I'm just adding overdrive, because I just think overdrive is just a must on all basses pretty much. I mean, maybe you can get away with it not on like a real bass guitar, because it can make it sound a bit too unrealistic, but for 808s I think it's just safe to put it on all of them, because it just makes the low end and the mid lows just punch just that little bit more, which is what you want from your 808. And what I'm doing here is the kicks. So the kicks in this case, they follow the 808 pattern, but you don't have to do this. I just think it's kind of, this will work, but if you do want to change it up a little bit and you know, put them on different bits, then it can work really well. Like Metro Boomin often changes the positions of his kicks as opposed opposing the 808s, and it kind of creates quite a nice bouncy effect. But for a beat like this, I think it's just to follow. And the EQ here on the kicks, what I like to do is I like to take out the low end like a little bit of the low end, and then boost the mid lows at a certain point, and then like 360 hertz is usually the point, and then I cut that on the 808s just so that they're really marrying together well. Instead of side chaining it, I don't really like side chaining it because there's just a bit too much movement in the low end. I like to just have them all playing like 100% of the time, but just so that I don't know, the 808 gives a bit more room for the kick, and the kick also does that for the 808, so it just kind of, I don't know, it just sounds really good. But yeah guys, that about wraps it up for my first video. The rest of the footage is just me arranging it out. So yeah, just drop a like on the video, bust me a subscription if you're game. But yeah, other than that boys, thank you very much for watching, and I'll speak to you in my next video.